The first conversation. I heard him before I saw him. Not footsteps, not movement, just a voice, low and steady, coming from somewhere deeper inside the building. I wouldn't go further if I were you. I froze halfway through the doorway, my hand still gripping the rusted metal frame. For a second, I thought I imagined it. That happens sometimes when you spend too long alone. Your brain fills the silence with something that sounds real enough to make you listen. Then he spoke again. You're thinking about checking the back exit first. You always do that. My grip tightened. I hadn't said anything. I hadn't made a sound since entering. The thought had been there, quiet and automatic, the same way it always was when I entered a new place. Clear the exits. Know your way out before anything else. I stepped inside slowly. The building had once been a small distribution center. Shelving units stripped bare, concrete floors stained with oil and dust, broken windows letting in thin strips of light. The voice came from the far side, near what looked like an office space with a collapsed wall. I'm not armed, he added, calm, almost casual. Neither are you. Knife on your right side, but you won't reach for it unless I move first. That made me stop again. My eyes adjusted enough to see him now, sitting in a chair that didn't belong in a place like this, positioned deliberately in the center of the open space. He wasn't slouched or tense, just sitting there, watching me like he'd been expecting me to arrive at that exact moment. You've been alone for, 19 days now, he said. I didn't answer. My mind was already working through possibilities. Maybe he'd been watching me, tracking me. Maybe I'd made a mistake somewhere, without realizing it. 20 actually, he corrected, tilting his head slightly. You stopped counting out loud after day 12. A cold pressure settled behind my ribs. That wasn't something anyone could guess. I hadn't written it down. I hadn't said it. Not even by accident. I took a step closer, slow enough to stay in control, far enough to keep distance. Who are you? I asked. He smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile that reassures you. It looked like recognition. That's not the question you want to ask, he said. You're trying to figure out how I know things I shouldn't. I didn't respond, but he was right. That was exactly where my thoughts had gone. Not who he was. Not yet. Just how. I've been here longer than you, he continued. Long enough to notice patterns. What patterns? He leaned back slightly, as if the question bored him. The way you move, the way you think before you act. You always pause half a second longer than necessary when entering a new space. You did it just now. You did it at the gas station 3 days ago, too. My chest tightened. I hadn't seen anyone at the gas station. You're guessing, I said. He shook his head. No, guessing is messy. This is cleaner. Silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. I tried to map everything he'd said into something logical. Observation, maybe. Long-term tracking. But that didn't explain the details. The counting. The thoughts I hadn't spoken. I shifted slightly, testing his reaction. You're trying to decide if I'm a threat? He said immediately. You've already concluded I am. You just don't know what kind. I felt my jaw tense. Stop doing that. Doing what? That. He studied me for a moment, then nodded like he understood something I hadn't said. All right, he said. I'll stop saying out loud. The way he said it made it worse. Not denial, not apology, just adjustment. I took another step forward, careful, controlled. He didn't move, didn't reach for anything, didn't even shift his posture. You've been watching me, I said. Yes. How long? He hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. Long enough. That hesitation mattered. It was the first thing that didn't feel perfectly smooth. From where? I pressed. He didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed on me, steady, measuring. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. You're wondering if you missed something obvious, he said quietly. A sign, a shadow, something that would explain how I've been following you without you noticing. I didn't speak. Don't worry, he added. You didn't miss anything. That wasn't reassuring, because if I hadn't missed anything, then there was nothing to see, and that was worse. Things he shouldn't know. I didn't sit down. He noticed that too. You don't like putting yourself at equal height, he said, glancing at the chair across from him. Makes it harder to react if something changes. I stayed standing. Stop narrating me. I'm not, he replied. I'm just saying what you're already thinking. That line again. Clean. Calm. Like it explained everything without actually explaining anything. I shifted my weight slightly, testing him again. Small movement. No sound. You're considering leaving, he said. But you won't. Not yet. I didn't respond. Instead, I changed direction. What's my name? He looked at me for a second longer than usual. Then he said it, just like that. No hesitation. No uncertainty. No build-up. My throat tightened before I could stop it. Lucky guess, I said. You don't believe that. No, I don't, I said, more sharply than I meant to. But I also don't believe you just know things for no reason. There's always a reason, he said. You just don't have it yet. That was the first time he'd admitted there was something behind it. I stepped closer, slowly circling to the side, keeping distance but changing angle. If you've been watching me, I said, then you saw where I came from. Yes. Then you know I don't stay in one place. You stayed in the pharmacy longer than usual, he replied. You were looking for antibiotics you didn't end up taking. I stopped moving. That was real, too specific, too recent. I hadn't seen anyone there. I'd checked. Twice. You're lying, I said. He shook his head. No. You're trying to make this fit something you understand. I let out a slow breath, forcing my mind back into control. Test him. Break the pattern. I looked at him. Steady? All right, I said. Then tell me this. Before all this started, where was I working? He didn't answer immediately. For the first time, he seemed to consider it. Warehouse, he said. Distribution. Night shifts. Wrong. Deliberately wrong. I held his gaze. Office, I said. Day shifts. He watched me for a moment. Then he smiled again. Not wide. Not amused. Just certain. No, he said quietly. That's what you told people. It's not what you actually did. Something in my chest tightened. He leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. You remember the loading docks, he continued. The way the lights flickered near the back. The smell of oil and dust. You used to count the trucks when things were slow. Not because you had to, just to stay awake. I didn't move, didn't blink, because that wasn't something I'd told anyone. Ever. You're watching me. I said again, but it sounded weaker this time. Less certain. Yes, he said. From where? He didn't answer. Instead, he tilted his head, studying me. You're trying to figure out the angle, he said. Line of sight. Distance. You want something physical. Something you can point to. That's how things work. Not everything. I felt irritation push through the tension. Everything works some way. Of course, he said. You just haven't seen this one before. I took a step back, resetting distance. Think. There had to be a limit. Something he didn't know. All right, I said. If you know so much, what was the last thing I ate? He answered instantly. Canned beans. 2 days ago. You didn't finish them. Wrong. I knew it was wrong. I held on to that. See, I said. That's not even close. He didn't react. Didn't correct himself. Just watch me. You're testing boundaries, he said. That's good. You should. I frowned. You got it wrong. No, he said calmly. You're remembering it differently. That made no sense. I ate yesterday. I said. You opened the can, he replied. You didn't eat it. You lost your appetite halfway through. I hesitated, just for a second, because I remembered opening the can. I remembered sitting there. But after that, the memory blurred. You're doing that thing again, he said quietly. What thing? You're trying to force your memory to stay stable. I felt a sharp edge of anger now. Stop. He didn't. You don't like not being sure, he continued. You rely on patterns. Facts. If those shift, everything else starts to feel unstable. Stop talking. You're thinking about leaving again. I said stop. Silence dropped between us. This time he let it stay. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. Then he spoke, softer. You're starting to realize something, he said. I didn't answer. You can't tell which parts one shouldn't know anymore. That landed harder than anything else. Because he was right. It wasn't just about secrets now. It was about certainty. What I knew, what I remembered, what I could trust. And for the first time since it started, I wasn't sure where the line was anymore. Testing reality. I needed something solid. Not guesses. Not reactions. Something I could control, measure, break if necessary. Because right now, everything about him felt like it was bending around me instead of existing on its own. I stepped back toward the doorway. Slow enough not to trigger anything sudden, but deliberate enough to create space. He watched me without moving. You're trying to reset, he said. I ignored him. This time, I wasn't going to react to what he said. That was part of the problem. Every response gave him something. A pattern, a confirmation. So I stopped giving him anything. No questions, no reactions, no visible decisions. I turned slightly, scanning the room again, forcing my attention outward. Shelves, walls, exits, anything that didn't involve him. You're going to leave through the same door you came in, he said calmly. You always prefer retracing steps. I didn't move, didn't even shift my weight. Silence stretched. Then I took a step in the opposite direction, not toward the entrance, toward the back office. A choice I hadn't planned until the moment I made it. If he was predicting patterns, I'd break them. If he was reading behavior, I'd change it. If he was somehow ahead of me, I'd stop being predictable. I moved quickly this time, crossing the open floor before he could say anything else. Behind me, I heard his voice again. You're not changing anything, he said. I kept walking. You're reacting to me. I reached the doorway to the office and stepped inside. The space was smaller, more enclosed, less light. A collapsed section of ceiling had spilled debris across one side, leaving only a narrow path through. Good. Limited movement. Limited visibility. I turned sharply, putting the wall to my back. For a moment, there was nothing. No voice. No movement. Then, you chose this room because it gives you control, he said from behind me. I turned. He was standing in the doorway. I hadn't heard him move. Not a step. Not a shift. Nothing. You're thinking about blocking the entrance, he continued, using that shelf. My eyes flicked to the metal frame leaning against the wall. I hadn't even fully formed the thought yet. I forced myself to look away from it. No, not that. I picked something else. The broken window behind him. If I move fast enough, you won't make it, he said. I froze. You'll slip on the debris, he added, glancing down at the floor. Left side. I looked down without meaning to. Loose concrete, dust, uneven footing. My jaw tightened. This wasn't observation anymore. This was timing. Stop, I said. He didn't respond. Didn't need to, because the problem wasn't what he was saying. It was when he was saying it. Before. Always before. I took a slow breath, forcing my thoughts into something structured. Think, if he's predicting, then delay. Create space between thought and action. Don't act immediately. I stayed still. Waited. 10 seconds. 20. Nothing. He didn't speak. Good. I focused on something simple. Raise your hand. Not now. Wait. Then, I lifted it suddenly. Fast. Without warning. You're trying to prove there's a delay, he said quietly. My hand stopped halfway up. Between thought and action, he continued. You think if you shorten it, I won't keep up. I lowered my hand slowly. That should have worked, I said. No, he replied, because you still decided to do it. That didn't make sense. Everything is a decision. Everything has a point where it begins. Unless I felt something shift in my chest. Cold, unstable. What if I don't decide? I asked. He tilted his head slightly. That's not how you work. No, I said, shaking my head. What if I don't choose anything? He didn't answer. For the first time, he didn't immediately respond. I focused on that, pressed into it. What if I just stop? I said, no plan, no action, no direction, just nothing. Silence filled the room again, thicker this time. He watched me, but there was something different in his expression now. Less certainty, more attention. You're trying to remove yourself from the process, he said slowly. I didn't move, didn't think, or tried not to. Let everything flatten. No decisions, no next step, just standing there, breathing, for a few seconds. It worked. He didn't say anything, didn't predict anything, didn't move. Then, you can't hold that, he said quietly. And just like that, the thought came back. Sharp, automatic. What does he mean? And the moment it did, he smiled. There it is, he said. My stomach dropped, because I hadn't said anything. I hadn't moved. I hadn't reacted. But somehow, he still knew exactly when I started thinking again. And that was worse than anything else, because it meant this wasn't about behavior. It wasn't about patterns. It wasn't even about actions. It was something deeper, something I couldn't see, something I couldn't stop. And for the first time, I started to wonder if the problem wasn't him at all, but something already inside my own head. The first prediction. I needed distance, not from the building, from him. But leaving now would mean turning my back on something I didn't understand, and that felt worse than staying. At least here I could see him, measure him, try to contain whatever this was. "You're not leaving yet," he said. I didn't respond. This time, I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to test him with small things. That hadn't worked. It only proved how far ahead he already was. I stepped past him instead, close enough to feel it. That quiet pressure again, like standing near something that shouldn't be there, but is anyway. He didn't move, didn't even turn. "You're going to walk to the back exit," he said, calm as always. "You'll check it, even though you already know it's blocked. Then you'll come back here." I kept walking, didn't change direction, didn't react, because I hadn't decided anything yet. Not really. I was just moving. That still counted. The hallway narrowed as I moved deeper into the building. Broken crates, collapsed shelving, debris scattered across the floor. I stepped over it carefully, my focus locked on each movement, not thinking ahead, just reacting, one step at a time. "You're trying to avoid deciding." His voice echoed faintly behind me. "It doesn't change the outcome." I ignored it, kept moving. The back exit came into view, a heavy metal door, bent inward at the frame, something large having forced it open from the outside. I already knew it wouldn't close properly. I'd seen doors like this before. Still, I reached for it, pulled. It shifted slightly, scraping against the floor, but didn't seal. I stopped, hand still on the handle, and for a moment, everything went quiet, because he was right. I had come here, exactly like he said, not because I planned it, but because it made sense, because it was the next logical step. And that was the problem. I let go of the door slowly, turned, walked back, each step heavier than the last. When I reached the main room again, he was still there. Same position, same posture, like nothing had changed. "You see it now," he said. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. "You think you're choosing," he continued, "but you're following structure, sequence, cause and effect. That's how everything works." I said, "Yes," he agreed, "which makes it predictable." I shook my head. "No, predictable doesn't mean known. It does if you're ahead of it." I stopped a few feet away from him. "That's not possible." "It already happened," he said simply. That sentence didn't make sense, not in any way I could process. "What do you mean?" I asked. He studied me for a moment, then said something that shifted everything. "You're going to reach for your knife," he said, "but you won't use it." I didn't move, didn't even breathe differently, because I hadn't thought about that. Not consciously. My hand stayed at my sides, still, controlled. "No," I said quietly. "I'm not." He didn't react, didn't argue, just waited. Seconds passed. Then, without thinking, my hand moved, fast, instinctive, gripping the handle at my side. I froze mid-motion, because I felt it happening before I understood why. Like my body had already decided something my mind hadn't caught up to yet. I forced my hand to stop, held it there, halfway, then slowly let go. "You didn't plan that," he said. I looked at him. "No, you reacted." I swallowed, trying to steady my breathing. "That doesn't mean you knew it." "It means I knew the conditions," he replied, "and the outcome that follows them." I stepped back, just one step, but it felt like more, because something inside me had shifted. Before, I thought he was observing, tracking, guessing. Now it felt like something else, something closer. "You're not reading me," I said slowly. He didn't answer. "You're ahead of me." Still nothing. "That's not the same thing," I continued. "That's not watching. That's—" I stopped, because I didn't have a word for it, and that scared me more than anything else so far. He tilted his head slightly. "You're starting to understand," he said. "No," I replied. I'm starting to realize something's wrong. Yes, he said. With you, I added. He smiled again. Small, controlled, but different this time. No, he said quietly. With you. That landed harder than anything before, because for the first time, I couldn't immediately reject it. I looked down at my hands. Still, steady, but now I was watching them like they didn't fully belong to me, waiting for the next thing I hadn't decided yet, and wondering if it had already happened somewhere ahead of me, before I ever got there. Breaking routine. I stopped trusting patterns. That was the first thing to go. Everything I relied on before, the way I moved, the way I cleared rooms, the way I made decisions, was built on consistency, structure, cause and effect. Now that structure felt like a weakness, because if he could follow it, then he could stay ahead of it. You're trying to remove predictability, he said. I didn't answer. I didn't even look at him this time. Instead, I turned sharply and walked in a direction that made no sense. Not toward an exit, not toward supplies, just a random line through the room, stepping over debris, changing pace without warning, fast, then slow, then stopping mid-step. No rhythm, no pattern. If he was tracking behavior, this should break it. You're introducing noise, he said calmly. It won't help. I changed direction again. Abrupt, cutting across the open space toward the far wall. No reason, no goal, just movement. You're still deciding, he continued. Random doesn't mean unstructured. It just means you don't see the structure. I clenched my jaw. That wasn't right. It couldn't be. I picked up a loose metal rod from the floor. Not because I needed it, because I hadn't planned to. Then I dropped it immediately. No use. No follow-through. Just action without purpose. You're testing action without intent, he said. I turned on him. Stop. He didn't. You think if your actions don't have meaning, they can't be predicted. Stop talking. They still come from somewhere. I walked past him again. Closer this time. Close enough that I could reach him if I wanted to. I didn't, but the option was there. You're considering it, he said quietly. I kept walking. Didn't slow down. Didn't react. Because I wasn't considering anything. I was just moving. At least, that's what I told myself. I reached the far end of the building and turned without thinking, retracing my steps halfway, then cutting left into a narrow aisle between collapsed shelving. Tight space. Limited movement. Good. You're trying to trap variables, he said from somewhere behind me. I stopped. Listened. Nothing. No footsteps. No sound of movement. Just his voice. Consistent. Measured. You want fewer outcomes, he continued. Fewer possibilities to count for. I moved again. Faster this time. Sharp turns. Unpredictable shifts. Anything to break the sequence. But every time I changed direction, his voice adjusted. Not reacting. Anticipating. You're about to turn right. I didn't. I went left instead. Immediately. Without hesitation. Silence. For a second, nothing. Then, you changed because I said it, he replied. My chest tightened. That was true. I hadn't chosen left. Not really. I'd rejected right, which meant he still controlled the outcome. I slowed down. That wasn't working. None of this was working. I needed something else. Something deeper. Not movement. Thought. If the problem wasn't what I did, then it was what came before it. I stopped completely. Closed my eyes. No movement. No direction. No next step. Empty. Just nothing. You're trying to disconnect, he said. I opened my eyes. Frustration cut through the tension now. How? I asked, how are you doing this? He didn't answer directly. Instead, he watched me like I'd already asked the wrong question. You keep focusing on the outcome, he said. The action, the result. What else is there? The part before it. I stared at him. That doesn't make sense. It does, he said calmly. You just haven't separated it yet. I stepped closer again, closer than before, enough to see details now. The way his expression didn't change. The way his breathing stayed steady. No stress. No uncertainty. You're saying you know what I'm going to do. I said, yes. before I do it. Yes, that's not prediction. No. Then what is it? He tilted his head slightly, and for the first time, there was something else in his expression. Not certainty, not calm, something closer to interest. Why do you think it feels like you're catching up? He asked. I didn't answer, because I already knew the answer. I just didn't want to say it. Because you are, he said quietly. The words settled into something heavier than before. Not just unsettling, not just wrong. Impossible. You're not ahead of me, I said slowly. He didn't respond. You're not predicting anything. Still nothing. You're just... I stopped, because the word formed before I could stop it, and the moment it did, he smiled. Say it, he said. I shook my head, but it was already there. Clear, unavoidable. You're inside the decision, I said. His smile widened slightly. Not amused, not mocking, just confirmed. And that was worse than anything else so far, because it meant there was nothing to break. No pattern, no behavior, no routine, nothing I could change, because whatever he was doing, it wasn't reacting to me. It was happening at the same time I was. The rules appear. I didn't move, not forward, not back, because for the first time, movement felt irrelevant. If what he said was true, if he wasn't predicting, if he wasn't reacting, then nothing I did physically would change anything. The problem wasn't distance. It wasn't position. It was something else entirely. You're starting to adjust, he said quietly. I kept my eyes on him. Then explain it. I said, if you know what this is, if you understand it, then explain it. He didn't answer right away. That pause again. Small, but noticeable, like there were limits. You won't like the explanation, he said. Try me. He studied me for a second, then nodded slightly. All right, he said, but you need to understand something first. What? There isn't one rule, he said. There are conditions. That's the same thing. No, he replied calmly. Rules are fixed. This isn't. That didn't help. Then start with one, I said. He leaned back slightly, as if organizing something in his head. Fine, he said. First condition, you don't act before you think. I frowned. That's obvious. Yes, he said, which is why it matters. I waited. He didn't continue. So, I said, what does that change? It means there's always a point before action, he said. A moment where the decision exists before it becomes movement. That's just how thinking works. Yes, he said again, and that's where I am. I felt a slow pressure build in my chest. That's not possible. It doesn't need to be possible, he replied. It's happening. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to stay focused. All right, I said, if that's true, then why don't you know everything? He didn't answer immediately. Another pause, longer this time. There are limits, he said finally. That was new. What kind of limits? He shifted slightly in his chair, the first real movement he'd made in a while. I don't see everything, he said. Only what connects. Connects how? To you. I stared at him. That doesn't explain anything. It does, he said. You're just trying to make it physical. Because it should be. Not this. Silence settled between us again. But this time, it felt different. Less like tension. More like something unfolding. You can't read everyone, I said slowly. No. Just me? Yes. Why? He hesitated. And that hesitation mattered more than anything he'd said so far. Because it meant. He didn't have a clean answer. I don't know, he said. I watched him carefully. For any sign that he was lying. Any shift. Any inconsistency. But there was nothing. Just the same calm tone. The same steady presence. That doesn't make sense, I said. I know. That answer felt honest. And that made it worse. Then what else? I pressed. What other conditions are there? He tilted his head slightly, considering. You can resist, he said. I narrowed my eyes. I've been trying that. No, he said. You've been reacting. That's the same thing. It's not. I took a step closer, then explained the difference. He looked at me for a moment, then said something that didn't feel like an explanation, but a warning. Resisting means not following the path, he said. And you haven't done that yet. I felt a flicker of irritation. I've changed everything. I said, my movement, my timing, my decisions. Yes, he agreed, but all of it still leads somewhere. That's unavoidable. Exactly. I stopped, because that felt like something. You're saying the outcome is fixed. I said, no, he replied. The path is. That doesn't make sense. It will. I shook my head slightly. No, if the path is fixed, then the outcome is fixed. Not necessarily, he said. You can reach the same point in different ways. That's still predictable. Yes. Frustration started to creep in again. Then what's the limit? I asked, what can't you do? He went quiet, longer than before. Then, I can't act for you, he said. That landed differently. I held on to it. You can't control me. No. You can't make me do anything. No. Then this is just observation. No. I clenched my jaw. Then what is it? He met my eyes directly, and for the first time, there was no distance in his gaze. No separation. Just something direct. Immediate. Think of it like this, he said. You're always moving forward. I didn't respond. You experience it step by step, he continued. Moment by moment. Decision by decision. And you don't. He shook his head slightly. I see the structure of it, he said. I felt that cold pressure again. Stronger now. What does that mean? It means I know where you're going, he said quietly, even if you don't yet. Silence followed. Heavy, unavoidable, because part of me, the part one didn't want to admit, was starting to see it, not understand it, not fully, but enough to feel the edges of it, enough to realize this wasn't random. It wasn't a trick. It wasn't something I could break with effort or logic. There were rules, conditions, limits, but none of them worked the way I needed them to. And that was the problem, because for the first time, hope didn't feel like control. It felt like something I didn't fully understand. And that made it just as dangerous as everything else. Not the first time. I stared at him longer than I should have, because something had shifted, not in what he was saying, but in what he wasn't. You don't know why it's me, I said slowly, but you know how it works. Yes, and you've seen it before. That was the part that mattered. That was the part he hadn't said yet, but I could feel it. He didn't answer immediately. That pause again. But this one was different. He wasn't calculating. He was deciding whether to say it. You're not the first, he said. The words landed clean. Too clean, like they'd been waiting. My chest tightened. How many? I asked. I don't know, he said. That sounded wrong. You don't know? I don't track them, he replied. It's not like that. Then how do you know I'm not the first? He looked at me, steady, because I've done this before. Silence followed. Heavy, because that changed everything. Not a coincidence. Not a random connection. A pattern. Something that had happened more than once. With who? I asked. He didn't answer right away. Then, different people, he said. Different places. That's not an answer. It's the only one you'll get. I felt frustration push through the tension again. No, I said, if this has happened before, then something caused it. Something connects it. There is a connection, he said. What? He didn't respond. Just watched me, waiting, like I was supposed to figure it out. I shook my head. Stop doing that. Doing what? Leaving gaps like I'm supposed to fill them in. You already are. That wasn't helpful. It never was. I stepped away from him, pacing now, not randomly this time. Focused, controlled. If this has happened before, I said, then what happened to them? That was the real question. The one that mattered. Because whatever this was, it didn't end here. It didn't stop with conversation. Something came after. He didn't answer immediately. And that was the problem. Because every time he hesitated, it meant something mattered. They didn't stay, he said finally. That's not what I asked. I know. I stopped pacing, turned back toward him, then answer it. He held my gaze, long enough that it felt deliberate. They couldn't maintain it, he said. Maintain what? This. The word hung there, vague, unfinished. What does that mean? I asked. It means it gets harder, he said, the longer it continues. How? They lose track. Of what? He didn't answer. Again, I clenched my jaw. Of what? I repeated. Of themselves, he said quietly. That landed heavier than anything else so far, because it wasn't physical. It wasn't survival. It wasn't about being attacked or infected or chased. It was something else. Something internal. How? I asked. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he said, You've already felt it. I went still. What? The moment where you weren't sure if something was your thought, he said, or something else. My chest tightened again, because that had happened, back in the last room, with the memory, the gap. That's not proof, I said. It's the beginning. I shook my head. No, that's confusion. Yes, he said. At first. At first, the words echoed. What happens after? I asked. He looked at me, and this time, there was no pause. They stopped separating it, he said. Separating what? Themselves from the process. That didn't make sense. Not fully, but enough of it did. Enough to feel wrong. You're saying they lose control. No, he said. Control was never there. That's not true. It is, he replied calmly. You just didn't notice before. I took a step back. Not because I planned to, because I needed distance again, even though it didn't matter. They died. I asked. He tilted his head slightly. Some did. Some. The word stuck. What about the others? He didn't answer. And this time, that silence felt like the answer. I exhaled slowly, trying to steady something that wasn't physical. If this is a pattern, I said, then it started somewhere. Yes. Where? He didn't respond. But something in his expression shifted, just slightly, enough to notice. You know, I said, silence. You know where this started. He looked at me, and for the first time, there was something else there. Not calm, not certainty. Something closer to recognition. I know when it started, he said. That was new. When? He held my gaze, long enough that I felt it before he said it. Not heard it, felt it. Before you met me, he said. My stomach dropped, because that didn't make sense. This started when I saw him, when I spoke to him, when this, whatever this was, began. But if he was telling the truth, then it didn't start here. It didn't start now. It didn't start with him, which meant whatever this was had already been happening before I even noticed it. And that was worse, because it meant I wasn't at the beginning of anything. I was already somewhere in the middle, and I had no idea how far it had gone. The hidden pattern. I stopped asking him questions, because every answer made things worse. Not clearer, not more logical, just wider. Like I was stepping into something that had already been built long before I noticed it. So instead, I started thinking backward, not about him, about everything else. The outbreak, the infected, the small details I ignored because they didn't fit into something clean. You're trying to connect it, he said. I didn't look at him, didn't respond, because this time, he wasn't leading. I walked slowly across the room, eyes scanning without really seeing anything in front of me. Instead, I was replaying. Moments. Fragments. The first infected I saw. Standing in the road. Not moving. Just waiting. Head slightly tilted. Like it was listening to something I couldn't hear. You noticed it then, he said quietly. I ignored him. Focus harder. The second time. The gas station. The one I thought was empty. I remembered the feeling. That pause before entering. Not fear. Something else. Like something was already there before I confirmed it. My chest tightened, because that wasn't just instinct. That was awareness. You're getting closer, he said. I turned slightly, just enough to keep him in my peripheral vision. Not directly. not fully, because I didn't want him inside the center of what I was thinking. The pharmacy, the memory gap, the can. I remembered opening it, sitting down, then nothing clear after that, like something had overwritten part of it, not erased, just blurred. You think it's memory loss, he said. It is, I replied. No, he said, it's interference. That word stuck. Interference. I stopped walking, turned to face him fully now. That's not how memory works. It is now. That's not an explanation. It's a description. I shook my head. No, memory doesn't just blur randomly. Not randomly, he said. I went still, because that mattered. If it's not random, I said slowly, then it's elective. He didn't respond, which meant it was. I felt something shift. Not panic. Not yet. Something closer to alignment. Pieces starting to fit. You said this isn't about action, I continued. It's before that. Yes. And it connects to me. Yes. And it's happened before. Yes. I took a slow breath, then said it. This isn't you, I said. He didn't move. Not completely, I added. Silence. But not empty. Waiting. You're part of it, I said. But you're not the source. Still nothing. That's why you don't know everything, I continued. That's why there are gaps. He tilted his head slightly, not correcting, not confirming, just listening. You're experiencing it too, I said. That made him react. Not physically. Something smaller. A shift in focus. That's closer, he said. Closer. Not right. Not yet. I pressed forward. The infected, I said, they don't act randomly either. No, they move toward things. Yes. People, sound, movement. Yes. But sometimes I stopped because I remembered something I hadn't thought about clearly before. The way one of them had stopped, paused, turned its head slightly before moving, like it had chosen. They hesitate, I said. Yes. Why? He didn't answer, but I already knew, or at least I could feel it forming. Because something else is there, I said. Silence. Heavy. Then, define something else, he said. I shook my head. I don't know yet. Then keep going. I exhaled slowly, thinking, connecting, not reacting. The infected lose higher function, I said. That's what everyone assumes. Yes. But what if they don't lose it? I continued. What if something replaces it? He didn't respond, which meant that mattered, not replaces. I corrected. Overlaps. That word felt right. Better. More accurate. Overlap of what? He asked. I looked at him directly now, because I needed to say it clearly. Awareness. I said. Silence. Then, that's vague, he replied. Then let me make it clearer, I said. I stepped closer. Slow. Controlled. If something is happening before action, I said, then it exists at the point where decisions form. Yes. And if that same thing is affecting memory, yes, then it's not just observing. I said, no, it's interacting. He watched me carefully, closer now than before. You're building a model, he said. I'm building something that makes sense. I replied, does it? More than anything else so far. He didn't argue, which meant it held, at least partially. I continued. You said you see the structure. I said, not the steps. Yes. And the infected, I paused. They don't think like we do anymore. No, but they still move toward something. I said, yes. Which means whatever this is, I took a breath. It's not just inside me. Silence. Then, no, he said. That confirmation hit harder than anything else because it expanded everything. This wasn't a connection between two people. It wasn't isolated. It wasn't contained. It was part of the outbreak, part of whatever change infected, part of whatever was already happening. Before I noticed it, then why can you talk? I asked, because I'm still here, he said. That's not an answer. It's the only one that matters. I stared at him, trying to reconcile it. You're not fully gone, I said. No, but you're not fully normal either. No, that left one option. One possibility I didn't want to say. You're in between, I said. He didn't deny it, didn't confirm it either. But the silence, that was enough. Because it meant the pattern wasn't just external. It wasn't just something happening around us. It was something happening through us, through decisions, through memory, through awareness itself. And if that was true, then this wasn't mind reading. It wasn't prediction. It wasn't observation. It was something else entirely. Something tied to the outbreak. Something that didn't just change bodies, but changed the way decisions happened, before we even realized we were making them. And that meant this wasn't about survival anymore. It was about control, and I was starting to lose it. The real threat. I stopped thinking about escape, not because I didn't want to leave, but because leaving didn't solve anything anymore. If this thing, whatever it was tied to the outbreak, to the infected, to something deeper than movement or behavior, then distance meant nothing. It wasn't about where I stood. It was about what I was connected to. You're accepting it faster now, he said. I didn't answer, because that wasn't acceptance. It was recognition, and recognition felt worse. I looked at him differently now, not as a person I needed to understand, but as something I needed to define. You're not like them, I said. No, but you're not like me either. No, that left the space in between. The part one didn't have a name for. What are you? I asked. He didn't hesitate this time. Still here, he said. That's not an answer. It's the only one that matters. I felt irritation rise again, but it didn't last, because I was starting to understand why he answered like that. It wasn't avoidance. It was limitation. He didn't have the words. Or maybe the words didn't exist yet. You said they lose track. I said, the others. Yes. Of themselves. Yes. I stepped closer. Careful. Measured. But you didn't. He watched me, long enough to make the silence feel deliberate. I did, he said. That stopped me. What? I did lose track, he continued. Just not completely. That didn't make sense. You're talking like you're still in control. I'm not, he said calmly. Then how are you? Because control isn't what you think it is. That line again. Everything's circling back to the same idea. That what I thought I understood wasn't the right way to look at it. I took a slow breath. Try and hold on to something stable. You're connected to it, I said. Yes. The same thing affecting the infected. Yes. And it's affecting me too. He didn't answer, but he didn't need to, because we both knew the answer. Yes. That word didn't come out of his mouth, but it landed anyway. I felt something shift inside me again. Subtle, but there, like a thought forming before I chose it. What does it want? I asked. He tilted his head slightly. That's not the right question. Then what does it do? He said. Fine, I snapped. What does it do? He looked at me, direct, focused. It removes separation, he said. I frowned. That doesn't mean anything. It means you don't stay isolated, he replied. Not in the way you think. I felt that pressure again, behind my eyes this time. What does that have to do with the infected? I asked. They don't separate at all, he said. And I do. For now. That word again. For now. How long? I asked. He didn't answer. I took another step closer. Too close now. But I didn't care. How long? I repeated. He met my eyes. And this time, there was something else there. Not calm. Not certainty. Something closer to warning. It depends on how much you resist, he said. And if I don't, silence. Then you won't notice when it happens. That landed harder than anything else so far, because it wasn't about pain, or death, or being attacked. It was about not knowing. You're saying I'll lose control. No, he said. You'll lose the idea that you ever had it. I felt my breathing change. Not faster, not panicked, just different, unsteady in a way I couldn't correct. That's not possible, I said. It already started. I shook my head. No. Yes. I would know. No, he said quietly. You wouldn't. Silence filled the space again. Heavy, unavoidable, because part of me, the part one didn't want to acknowledge, was already questioning that. The memory gap, the hesitation, the moments where thought didn't feel entirely mine. You think this is about him, he said suddenly. I blinked. What? The infected, he continued. You think they're the end result. They are. No. That word came out sharper than anything he'd said before. They're the visible part, he added. The part you can recognize. And the rest? He didn't answer immediately. Then, you're looking at it, he said. My chest tightened. No. Yes. I stepped back this time. Instinctive. Because that crossed something. You're saying you're like them. No, he said. Then what? I'm earlier, he replied. Earlier. The word echoed. Not after. Not worse. Before. You're not fully infected. I said. No. But you're not untouched either. No. So this is a stage. He didn't confirm it, but he didn't deny it either. And that was enough. Because it meant this wasn't just happening. It was progressing. Step by step. Layer by layer. From awareness to overlap to something else. Something closer to what I'd seen on the road. Something that didn't think the same way anymore. Didn't choose the same way. Didn't separate the same way. You're afraid now, he said. I didn't answer. Because this time, he didn't need to be right. It was already there. Not fear of him. Not exactly. Fear of what he represented. Of where this led. You're not the threat, I said quietly. He watched me. Waiting. This is, I continued. He nodded once. Slow. Deliberate. Yes. That confirmation felt worse than everything else. Because it removed the last illusion I had. That this was something I could confront. Something I could fight. Something I could escape. But this wasn't a person. It wasn't an enemy I could see. It was a process. Something already happening. Something I was already part of. And the worst part was that I didn't know how far it had gone. Or how much of me. Can he be trusted? I stopped thinking about what he was. And started thinking about what to do with him. Because whatever this was, process, pattern, connection, it didn't change the immediate reality. He was still here. Still watching. Still inside whatever this thing connected. And that made him a problem. You're shifting focus, he said. I didn't answer. Because this time, he was right in a way that mattered. Understanding him wasn't helping. Knowing the rules wasn't helping. The pattern was bigger than both of us. But he was something I could act on. You're thinking about removing me, he added. I looked at him directly. Yes. No point denying it. Not anymore. He didn't react. Didn't move. Didn't even change expression. You considered it before, he said. I'm considering it now. That was different. More direct. More immediate. He nodded slightly. Because you think it will stop this. I think it might, I said. That's not the same thing. No, I replied. But it's enough. Silence settled between us. Not tense. Not unstable. Just clear. For the first time, the situation felt simple. Not easy, but defined. Two options. He stays, or he doesn't. You're weighing outcomes, he said. Yes. Then be accurate. I narrowed my eyes. Accurate how? If you remove me, he said, you remove what you can see. And you don't remove what's happening. I clenched my jaw. That's an assumption. No, he said. It's a condition. That word again. Conditions. Not rules. Not guarantees. Just structures. You said you don't know everything. I replied, so how do you know that? He didn't answer immediately. Then, because I've seen it before, he said. That landed hard. Again. What happened? I asked. They tried, he said. Tried what? The same thing you're thinking. My chest tightened slightly. And they felt better, he said. For how long? He held my gaze. Long enough to believe it worked. That wasn't reassuring. How long? I repeated. He didn't answer, which meant not long enough. I looked away from him for the first time in a while, not out of fear, out of calculation. If removing him didn't stop it, then what did it change? You're still going to consider it, he said. Yes, because it gives you control. Yes. He nodded again, like that made sense, like that was expected. You're not wrong, he said. That surprised me. You just won't get what you think you will. I stepped closer, slow, deliberate. Then what do I get? A delay, he said. That word stuck. Delay, not solution, not escape, just time. How much? I asked. I don't know. That was honest, or at least it sounded honest. And that made it harder, because if he was lying, this would be easier. If he was manipulating, this would be simpler. But he wasn't, not in a way I could identify. You're not trying to stop me, I said. No. Why? Because you're going to decide either way. That doesn't answer question. It does, he said. You just don't like it. I exhaled slowly, trying to steady something that didn't feel stable anymore. You don't care if you live or die, I said. He thought about that. Then, I don't think it works like that anymore, he replied. That wasn't an answer. Not really. But it told me enough. He wasn't operating on the same priorities. Not survival. Not fear. Something else. Something that made this decision uneven. You're not afraid, I said. No, I am. Yes. That difference mattered. It was the only clear advantage I had left. I stepped back slightly, creating space, not because it changed anything, but because it felt necessary. You're waiting for me to decide, I said. Yes. And you already know what I'm going to do. He didn't answer, but the silence, that was confirmation. I looked at my hand, at the knife at my side, still there, still real, still something I could choose. That hadn't changed. Not yet. You said you can't act for me. I said. Yes. Then this is still mine. For now, he replied. That word again. For now. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not panic. Not exactly. Something sharper. More focused. Because this was a line. Not understanding. Not theory. Action. A decision that would define what came next. You're hesitating, he said. Yes. Because you want certainty. Yes. You won't get it. I nodded slightly. I know. Silence stretched again. But this time, it didn't feel like pressure. It felt like space. The kind you get right before something happens. Right before a decision locks in. I looked at him. Really looked. Not as a threat. Not as a person. As something in between. Something I didn't understand, but had to act on anyway. You're not the problem, I said quietly. No, but you're part of it. Yes. That was enough. Not certainty. Not clarity. Just enough. I shifted my weight slightly. Felt the decision forming. Not fully conscious. Not fully controlled. Just there. And for the first time, I didn't try to stop it. Because whether he knew it or not, whether I understood it or not, this was still something I had to do. Even if I didn't know why. Even if it changed nothing. Even if it was already decided. I just needed to know if I could still make it. The experiment. I didn't use the knife. Not yet, because if what he said was true. If removing him only delayed something I didn't understand, then acting without information would just push me further into it. I needed proof. Not theory. Not explanation. Something measurable. You're choosing to test instead of act, he said. Yes. That's new. No, I replied. It's controlled. He nodded slightly, like that distinction mattered. Then be precise, he said. I will. I moved away from him, creating distance again, not because it changed anything, but because it helped me think. If this connection existed before action, then I needed to isolate the moment before action, reduce variables, limit influence. You said you see the structure. I said, not the steps. Yes. Then I need to remove the structure. You can't. I can reduce it. He didn't argue, which meant That mattered. I focused on something simple, a basic action. Raise your hand. Not immediately, not instinctively. I stood still, breathing evenly, forcing my thoughts into something deliberate. No impulse, no reaction, just a single, controlled intention. Then, slowly, I lifted my hand. No sudden movement, no surprise, just a steady motion from rest to completion. He watched, silent. You didn't say anything, I said. No. Why? Because you removed the trigger, he replied. That made sense. Partially. What trigger? The need to predict quickly, he said. You slowed it down. I lowered my hand. Then speed matters. Yes, that was something. Not a solution, but a condition. I shifted slightly, thinking, if I move fast, you stay ahead, I said. If I move slow, I don't need to, he finished, because there's nothing to anticipate. Yes. I nodded once. Processing. That meant the connection wasn't constant. It adapted, changed based on how I moved through decisions. Then what about thought? I asked, what about it? If I slow that down, does it change anything? He didn't answer immediately. Then, try it, he said. I closed my eyes, not to block him, but to reduce input, focus inward. One thought, simple, pick a direction. Not yet. Wait, hold it, delay, then left. I opened my eyes and stepped left immediately. Fast, no hesitation. You already formed it, he said. I stopped. That was delayed. No, he replied. That was compressed. I frowned. That's not the same thing. It is here. Frustration pushed through again. This doesn't make sense. It does, he said. You're just still inside it. Inside it. That word again. I exhaled slowly. Reset. Think differently. Not speed. Not delay. Something else. What if I remove intention completely? I asked. You can't. Then I reduce it. He tilted his head slightly. Show me. I focused again. But this time, no clear thought. No direction. Just movement. I stepped forward without deciding where to go next. Then another step. Then another. No plan. No goal. Just continuation. He stayed silent. For longer than before. That mattered. You're fragmenting it, he said finally. I stopped. What does that mean? You're breaking the sequence into smaller pieces, he replied. Harder to track. So it's working. For now. That word again. Always temporary. Always incomplete. But it doesn't stop it, he added. Why not? Because it reconnects. How? He looked at me. Direct. Focused. Because you're still you, he said. That didn't help. Explain. You return to structure, he continued. Eventually. I thought about that. About how every action led somewhere. Even random movement became direction over time. You're saying it rebuilds itself. Yes. That was worse. Because it meant there was no permanent break. No clean separation. Just temporary disruption. I stepped back again. Mind racing now, but in a different way. Not panic. Analysis. If it reconnects, I said, then it spreads a consistency. Yes. And if consistency increases, it strengthens. That made my chest tighten, because that meant something else. Something I hadn't considered yet. This isn't just about me, I said. No. I looked at him. Really looked. You said you've done this before. Yes. With others. Yes. And they lost track. Yes. I felt it then. Clear. Unavoidable. This grows, I said. He didn't answer. But he didn't need to. It starts small, I continued. Connection. Overlap. Prediction. Yes. Then it expands. Yes. And eventually, I stopped because I already knew the rest. The infected. The way they moved. The way they hesitated. The way they didn't separate anymore. This isn't just happening to me. I said quietly, no, it's spreading. Silence. Then, yes. That confirmation hit harder than anything else. Because it meant this wasn't contained, not isolated, not personal. It was part of something larger, something already moving, already changing people, already breaking the boundary between thought and action. And if that was true, then this wasn't just about understanding it or stopping it. It was about how far it had already gone and how many people were already inside it without realizing it. The breaking point. I shouldn't have asked anything else. That was the point where I still had distance, still had control, still had something separating me from whatever this was becoming. But I didn't stop, because part of me still believed there was a limit, something he couldn't reach, something that was mine. You said it spreads, I said, through connection. Yes. And it connects through decisions. Yes. I took a slow breath, then asked the question I shouldn't have. What's the deepest thing you can access? He didn't answer immediately, and that pause, it felt different from the others. Not hesitation, not uncertainty, something heavier, like he was deciding whether I could handle it. Don't, he said quietly. That stopped me. What? Don't ask that. I stared at him. You've answered everything else. Not this. Why? He held my gaze, long enough to make it feel like something was already happening. Because this is where it breaks, he said. My chest tightened. Breaks what? You. That should have been enough. A warning, a boundary. But I ignored it, because I needed to know, because not knowing felt worse. Tell me, I said. He didn't move, didn't react, just watched me. Then, you don't remember the third night, he said. My stomach dropped. What? You remember the first, he continued. You remember the second, but the third. I remember it. No, he said calmly. You don't. That's not true. You woke up in a different place than you fell asleep, he said. My breath caught, because that was wrong. It had to be. But something didn't line up. You told yourself you moved in your sleep, he added. That wasn't worth thinking about. I felt a sharp pressure behind my eyes. That happens, I said. Not like that. Stop. You weren't alone that night. My vision narrowed slightly. No. Yes. I checked that place. After, I shook my head. No. I would have seen. You did. Silence. Then, you just didn't recognize it. That didn't make sense. It couldn't. What are you talking about? I asked. He leaned forward slightly, closer than before. And when he spoke, his voice changed. Not louder, not sharper, just more precise. You remember the sound, he said. Behind the wall. Not loud, just enough to notice. My chest tightened, because I did remember that. Barely, like something I'd pushed aside. You told yourself it was a building settling, he continued. Old structure, weak supports. I felt my breathing shift. That's what it was. No. I shook my head again. No. You stood up, he said. Walked toward it, slowly, because you didn't want to make noise. My hands felt colder now. You remember that part, he added. I didn't answer, because I did. I remembered standing, moving, listening. You reached the wall, he continued. Put your hand against it. My throat tightened, because that was real. That was clear. You felt something on the other side, he said. No. Yes. It was nothing. It moved. My chest hitched slightly. No. You froze, he said, because you realized it wasn't the building. I took a step back. Instinctive. Stop. You didn't run, he continued. You stayed there, listening. I said, stop. You wanted to understand it. I said, and then it stopped. Silence. Heavy. Crushing. And that's the part you don't remember, he said. I stared at him, because something was wrong. Not just what he was saying, but what it was doing to me. What happened? I asked. My voice didn't sound steady. He didn't answer immediately. Then, you opened the door, he said. My heart dropped. No. Yes. There was no door. There was, he said, hidden, behind the panel. I shook my head. No, I checked that place. After, that word again. After, what was there? I asked. I didn't want the answer, but I needed it. He looked at me, and for the first time, there was something close to regret in his expression. You were, he said. Everything stopped. What? You were already there, he repeated. That didn't make sense. It couldn't. I don't. You saw yourself, he said. My chest tightened so sharply it felt like something snapped. No. Yes. That's not possible. You didn't recognize it, he said. Not fully. I took another step back. Then another, because something inside me, something stable, was starting to break. You told yourself it was wrong, he continued, that it didn't make sense. So you left. I would remember that. No, he said quietly. You wouldn't. Why? Because you chose not to. That hit harder than anything else. Because it meant it wasn't taken. It wasn't erased. It was removed by me. You're lying, I said, but it didn't sound convincing. Not even to me. He didn't argue, didn't defend it. Just watched me, waiting, like he already knew what came next. And that was the worst part, because I could feel it forming. That decision, that reaction, not fully conscious, not fully mine, but there, rising, sharp, immediate, because if what he said was true, if even a part of it was true, then this wasn't just happening now. It had already happened, before I met him, before I understood anything, before I had a chance to stop it. And that meant whatever I did next was already the choice. I didn't think anymore, not because I couldn't, but because thinking wasn't mine anymore. Every thought felt like it arrived already shaped, already positioned, already leading somewhere I hadn't chosen. So I stopped trying to understand it, stopped trying to separate it, stopped trying to hold on to something that was already slipping, and focus on the only thing that still felt real. Action. You're gonna do it, he said. I didn't answer, because this time, I didn't want him to be right. Not about this. Not about the one thing that still felt like it belonged to me. My hand moved, faster than before. Not hesitation, not testing, just movement. Clean, direct. The knife was already in my grip before I fully registered pulling it. You don't need to, he started. I didn't let him finish. I closed the distance in one step. No pause. No adjustment, no correction, just forward, because if I slowed down, if I gave it time, it wouldn't be mine anymore. The blade drove forward, straight, precise. I felt resistance. Then it gave. He didn't try to stop me, didn't move out of the way, didn't even raise his hands, just watched, like he knew exactly how it would happen, because maybe he did. The impact wasn't loud, no sudden noise. No struggle, just contact. Close. Immediate. Final. I held there for a second, frozen, because something inside me expected something else. A reaction, a change, something to confirm that I had done something real. But nothing changed. He looked at me, not surprised, not angry, not even afraid. Just still. You needed that, he said quietly. My grip tightened. I pulled back, stepped away, breathing uneven now, not from effort, from something else, something deeper. I looked at him, waiting for something to shift, something to break, something to end, but it didn't. The room stayed the same. The air stayed the same. The feeling, that pressure behind everything, still there, unchanged. No, I said under my breath. That wasn't right. It should have worked. It should have done something. You removed the variable, he said. I stared at him. What? You removed what you could act on, he continued. Not what's acting on you. My chest tightened again. No. Yes. I shook my head. No, that's not. You knew that, he said. I stopped because he was right. Part of me, the part one didn't want to acknowledge, already knew, already expected this, already understood that this wasn't the end. Then why? Why did I still do it? You wanted to know if you still could, he said. That landed clean, sharp, because that was it. Not to stop it, not to fix it, to prove something. that I still had control, that I could still act, that something, anything, was still mine. I looked down at my hand, still holding the knife, still steady. But now, it didn't feel like proof anymore. It felt like confirmation that I was reacting, not deciding. You're realizing it now, he said. I looked up. He was still there, still speaking, still unchanged. That didn't come from you, he said. My jaw tightened. Yes, it did. No, he replied calmly. It came from the same place everything else is coming from. That's not true. It is... I stepped back again. Distance. Space. But it didn't matter. It never did. You reached the same point, he continued. Just faster. The same point. That phrase echoed. Because it meant this wasn't deviation. It wasn't resistance. It wasn't even failure. It was part of the path. Exactly like everything else. You said I could resist. I said, you can. This doesn't feel like it. Because you didn't change the direction, he replied. I acted. Yes. But you didn't alter where it leads. I felt something collapse inside that thought. Because it made sense. Too much sense. You're saying this was always going to happen. I said. He didn't answer. But he didn't need to. The silence. That was enough. I looked around the room. Same walls. Same broken structure. Same empty space. Nothing changed. Except something inside me. Not broken. Not gone. Just shifted. Like a line had moved slightly. Barely noticeable. But permanent. This didn't stop anything. I said quietly. No. It didn't slow it. No. It just... I stopped because the word formed before I wanted it to. Confirmed it. He nodded. Once. Slow. Yes. I closed my eyes for a second. Not to escape. Not to reset. Just to feel where I was. Because this was the point. Not the moment I met him. Not the moment I understood it. This, the decision, the action, the realization that it didn't matter. And when I opened my eyes again, I knew something had changed. Not outside. Not in him. In me. Because now, I wasn't asking if I still had control. I was asking if I ever did. It didn't end. I waited for it to stop. Not the situation. Not the outcome. The feeling. That quiet pressure behind everything. The sense that something was just ahead of me. Slightly out of reach. Shaping what came next before I got there. It should have ended. That's what made sense. Remove the source. Remove the connection. Return to something normal. But nothing changed. Not immediately. Not visibly. The room stayed the same. The air didn't shift. The silence didn't break. And for a moment, I almost convinced myself it worked. Because there was nothing obvious. Nothing immediate. No voice. No interruption. No one speaking ahead of me. I stood there still, letting the absence settle. Letting the quiet feel like something real. Like something earned. Then, a thought formed. Simple. Clear. You should check the exit again. I didn't move. Not yet. Because that thought, it felt familiar. Not in what it said, but in how it arrived. Clean. Complete. Already shaped. Not something I built. Something I received. My chest tightened slightly. No, that didn't mean anything. That was normal. People think in complete thoughts all the time. That wasn't new. That wasn't different. A voice finished. I froze. Not because I heard it. Because I didn't. But the word, it didn't feel like mine. I turned slowly. The room was empty. He wasn't moving. Not speaking. Not reacting. Just there. Unchanged. Then, that same pressure again. Stronger now. Closer. Like something had moved forward while I wasn't paying attention. I swallowed, forcing myself to stay still. Don't react. Don't follow it. Don't let it lead. Another thought came. You're standing too long. I clenched my jaw. No, that's just normal. It's normal to think that, to evaluate, to adjust. That doesn't mean anything. But it didn't feel like evaluation. It felt like direction. Subtle, quiet, but there. I shifted my weight slightly, then stopped, because I hadn't decided to. Not fully. Not consciously. You see it, he said. I looked at him. Slowly. You're still talking. I said, no, he replied. Yes, you just... I didn't. That stopped me. Because I knew he hadn't. His mouth hadn't moved. His posture hadn't changed. There was no sound. And yet, the words were there. You're starting to separate it, he said. This time, I heard it, clear, out loud, from him. But it was too late, because now I knew the difference. There were two layers. One I could hear, one I couldn't, and they were both saying the same things. You removed me as a variable, he continued. I didn't respond, because my focus wasn't on him anymore. It was on the space between thoughts, the gap, or what I thought was a gap. You expected silence, he said. I looked down at my hands. Still, steady, but now, I wasn't sure what that meant. You thought it would end, he added. I exhaled slowly. It should have. Yes, he said. If it was just me, that confirmed it. Not a theory, not a possibility. A fact. This was never about him. He was just visible. The part one could interact with, the part one could act on. The rest was still here, still moving, still shaping things before I got to them. You're noticing the delay now, he said. What delay? Between when it happens, he replied, and when you realize it happened. That made my chest tighten, because I could feel it. Not clearly, but enough, like something had already shifted before I caught up to it. Another thought formed. Step back. I didn't move, held it, examined it. Not mine, not fully, but close enough to feel like it could be. That was a problem. Not control, not awareness. Similarity. It didn't feel foreign. It felt like me, just slightly ahead. You can't separate it cleanly, he said. I looked at him again. Why? Because it's built from you, he replied. That made sense. Too much sense. Which made it worse. Because it meant there was no clear boundary. No line. No point where I could say, this is me. That isn't. You're trying to find it, he said. Yes. You won't. Why? Because it doesn't exist the way you want it to. I felt something settle into that. Not panic. Not resistance. Something quieter. Heavier. Acceptance. Of a possibility I didn't want. This didn't end, I said. No. It didn't even change. It did, he replied. I looked at him. How? You notice. That was the difference. Not the process. Not the connection. Just awareness. I understood it now. Or enough of it. This wasn't something I could stop. Not directly. Not by removing people. Not by changing behavior. It was already part of how things worked. Part of how decisions formed. Part of how thoughts appeared. And now, I could see it. Which didn't give me control. It just removed the illusion that I had it. You're quieter now, he said. I didn't answer. Because there was nothing left to argue. Nothing left to test. Nothing left to break. Just this space. This awareness. This constant sense that something was always just ahead of me, waiting. And for the first time, I wasn't trying to catch up to it. I was trying to see how far behind I already was. Final log. I am recording this because I don't trust what comes next. If you find this, understand that the threat isn't what we thought it was. The infected are only the visible part of something deeper, something that moves before decisions form. I tried to isolate it, to test it, to remove the person I believed was causing it. That didn't work. Nothing I did changed it. It only showed me how far it had already gone. Thoughts don't always belong to you. Sometimes they arrive complete, shaped, already leading somewhere. That is where it lives. Not in the body, not in the infection alone, but in the moment before you act. If you notice it, it is already happening. If you don't, then you're further inside than I was. This isn't about surviving them anymore. It is about holding on to the idea that your decisions are still yours. I don't know if that can be stopped. I only know that once you see it, you can't unsee it. And if it can reach you before you realize, then it has already decided more than you think. And the next step may not belong to you at all, anymore, ever, again.